When you're a certified people pleaser, one of the biggest issues you probably have is setting boundaries, especially if you're someone like me. You didn't even know what a boundary was until maybe you went to therapy or you saw it being more viral on social media. And I feel like a lot of us recovering people pleasers or people that grew up in very toxic, chaotic, narcissistic family systems, we always wanted to be really nice. Okay, not kind, but nice. Especially if you're like me and you grew up believing you're not a good person. If you don't do everything that I tell you to do as your parent, then you're not nice, you're not kind, you're not all of these good things because you don't listen. And I pull this one version out of you that it's like survival mode, right? Like a lot of us go through this energy of like feeling like we're just surviving, just making it through another day because we felt like growing up, I just have to do what my parents need. And when I grow up, I never have to see you again. I never have to talk to you again, whatever. So then when you become an adult, you stick with this feeling of always needing to people please and always needing to give back to everybody else because you've spent your entire life over giving, overdoing, and over loving. So that now when you finally have the opportunity to actually like set boundaries and give back to yourself, you feel guilty, right? Because you're just like, well, I need to be a nice person. I need to make other people like me. I need to anticipate everyone else's needs, right? Which we'll get further into that later. But being nice is actually a form of manipulation because it's not who you really are. It's who you're trying to be so that people can like you or whatever. But you need to be kind. You need to be kind hearted, giving, but not to the extent of overgiving, loving, but not overloving. It's like a balancing act, right? I like to think that the universe doesn't place us here to be punching bags and mats for people to walk all over, right? Um, and the first part of setting boundaries is knowing that your needs matter. You're a human being. People need to meet their own needs first before we can meet the needs of other people. And every time you break a boundary with yourself, you're actually lowering your self worth, your self love, and your self concept, right? So, we're going to go over all the types of boundaries, but whether this is a boundary with someone like, hey, I don't like when you curse at me. I don't like when you talk to me a certain way. Please don't do that. Or with yourself, like saying, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to eat healthier. There are all different types of boundaries. So, when you don't honor yourself by saying, I come first because I am the longest relationship that I will always have in my life, then that's when you break your own code, right? So, what are some signs of people pleasing? I would say the very first sign is being overly empathetic, overly understanding. We talked about this previously in my narcissism videos, but if you're someone who gives everyone the benefit of the doubt, you're so understanding, you're so loving. Maybe you come from a home of abuse, of domestic violence, or just having really mean parents like I did, and understanding that it's not your fault that you were abused. And now you might have complex PTSD or borderline personality or, all these other names that these doctors and psychologists throw around because you're just labeling people who have lived through abuse and are now trying to make it in this world, right? Maybe you're someone who bends over backwards for everybody because you're scared of how they feel. Maybe you're someone who anticipates other people's needs very easily. Maybe you even think it's some kind of psychic gift or ability, but then you later realize, maybe I am psychic, but me anticipating everyone else's needs is because I was trained, to walk on eggshells. Like I remember when I was growing up, I would sense my mom's moods, and I'll just be like, okay, she's in a bad mood, so I can't ask her for what I need right now, right? I can't have her, sign this permission slip or ask her for advice. I have to wait until she's in a better mood or give it a few days because I was anticipating her needs. Are you someone who's trained to be a good boy or a good girl or a good person growing up? Were you rewarded when you did the dishes and, followed their commands? And what happened when, you were too tired or you had a legitimate excuse, right? It's not like you're a teenager and you say I'm tired every single day, but maybe you had a really hard test or it was a rough day. How were those needs treated, right? Um, I mean, for those of us that are parents, it's like good, kind, gentle, understanding parents would be like, okay, you'll do the dishes tomorrow. I understand. As long as it's not a pattern, right? Are you someone that constantly craves validation? Are you constantly trying to balance out your self worth and your self love through other people? Do you need other people's approval? Right? These are all questions you have to ask yourself because the thing with boundaries is if you love yourself and you seek approval through yourself, then you don't need other people to validate you, your experience, your forward movement, your life. Are you afraid of confrontation? Are you someone that would rather keep the peace? They say that if you keep the peace, but you're not keeping the peace within yourself because you're allowing other people to take that from you by not letting you speak your truth. Maybe you grew up in family systems where you weren't allowed to speak your truth. And if you did, you'd get hounded for it. Do you care too much what other people think? Here's the thing. Maybe you can predict what other people think or what other people need, but that is not your responsibility. It's not your responsibility to sit there and be like, this is what my boss needs. This is what my friend needs. This is what all these people need. But what about your needs? Are you being authentically true to yourself? Right? So let's just say boundaries at work are important, right? I've had horrible bosses. I need this on my desk by 9 p.m. Okay, but my hours are 8:30 to 5, and I will give this to you tomorrow morning. If this was a priority, you should have let me know it was a priority, right? It's not my job to anticipate your needs. It's not my job to be like, oh, it's the end of the month. I know you'll need this report when it's your responsibility to tell me what report to run, for example, or say the report changes every month. You don't need to remind your boss. We don't need to kiss anyone's ass. And a lot of times being a people pleaser like that, it doesn't give you the respect that you think it does. It doesn't put you in positions of leadership, right? You are allowed to be authentically yourself. You are allowed to allow other people to live their experience without trying to fix things for everyone. Maybe you had to fix a lot of things when you were growing up. Um, I think the biggest lesson that we as people pleasers, myself included, is learning to validate ourselves, to stop saying sorry, to stop feeling like we have to anticipate everyone's next breath, everyone's next move, committing more to ourselves, versus everyone else. And by that, it's like, okay, it's the end of the month, a project is due, and it hasn't been communicated to you. You're not the boss. That's not your responsibility. Or, overexerting yourself, right? A good example would be like, okay, the team needs you to stay late tonight. We have an unexpected project. You have kids. You're extremely exhausted. Here's the thing too, especially if you live in America. That's why a lot of Gen Z and younger millennials switch jobs so often because we know that we get paid better in other jobs. And that's actually a service I provide as well, resume help, but we'll leave that aside. A lot of us lack boundaries because we let everything slide. A boss was rude to us. They asked us to stay late once. They yelled at us for them forgetting a deadline. You know what I mean? If it wasn't your responsibility, it's not your fault. And by saying sorry and accepting accountability for something that you were never meant to be accountable for, these people also can't learn their lesson. And something that I like to talk about in the spiritual community is standing in the way of people's karma. When you are accepting responsibility for things that aren't your responsibility, you're taking away other people's karma because then they can't sit with themselves and be like, oh man, I should have done that. I should have realized that, right? I feel like a lot of times we as people pleasers are also afraid to compromise. We're also afraid of saying, okay, I can't stay late tonight, but maybe if you really, really need me, I could come in 30 minutes early or skip my lunch or whatever, or get a paid lunch, right? You need me, you could pay for my lunch. There's compromise. Um, and I feel like a lot of times that's how we get taken advantage of, especially like I've had jobs, because I have an accounting degree. I'm not just a psychic on TikTok. I've had jobs that really took advantage of me. I was working my first salary job at 19 as an accountant, and they were like, oh, well, since your salary, you can stay late and you don't get paid extra. But if you leave even 20 minutes early, you have to take a whole half hour, docking from your pay. Okay, so I'm salary. So I don't get paid if I spend extra time. But if I come in early and try to leave early, I can't do that either because I'm salary. Right. And that should have been my first sign for me that that job wasn't good, right? Because they were like, okay, she's young, impressionable, let's take advantage of her. Doesn't matter how early I come in, I couldn't leave early either because I was clocked for 8 to 5, right? And that's when you learn how to say no nicely. No, this job doesn't work for me. Regardless of if you just got hired, don't put it on your resume. No, I can't drive your kids. No, I can't do this. And no is a complete sentence. You don't have to sit there and overexert yourself, over explain yourself, over give. No, I'm sorry. I'm not going to be able to make it to that birthday party. Oh, okay. So I'm channeling right now too because I'm a channeler. So a lot of times when I sit and I do these videos, my spirit team tells me what to talk about. So I'm actually not talking to my grandma because last year she ended up getting sick for her birthday. And she said she'll let me know when they were moving her party to, because her and my dad are like a couple of days, like a week or two apart, right? So that weekend didn't work fine. So she called me on Friday night back in December and was like, okay, well, we have a birthday party happening, on Sunday at 3 o'clock. Didn't give me 2 days notice, right? And I'm like, listen, I'm a mom. I have 2 kids. Number one, I'm not going to have custody of them that day. Their dad has them. Number two, because I don't have custody of them that day, I am working. I run my own business and I schedule clients. And and my dad got so angry with me. And she's like, you need to reschedule your clients. I don't know how long I'm going to live. Guilt trip, guilt trip, guilt trip. And I said, listen, I'm sorry. You didn't give me enough time. I can't reschedule 4 or 5 clients. Is there any other day or time? No, no, no. Can I come earlier? Give you your gift. No, no, no. You need to come. You have to come. No compromise. And I ended up not going because my opinion of myself matters more. I am the type of person, my self boundary is I made commitments to my clients, and therefore I cannot allow myself to not meet my commitments just because you decided to tell me 2 days in advance that you wanted me this weekend. How'd you know I wasn't going to make other plans? And I understand it's your birthday, but, sometimes a lot of times saying no isn't easy. Confirmation hiccup. So I wanted to go over like the types of boundaries. There's like 7 or so. I did some Googling, right? And I also, these are things that I've experienced on my own, right? So number one is my favorite, emotional boundaries. So emotional boundaries allow us to know and recognize our own needs and feelings. Okay, so a big one for me has been needing time after a fight. So I'll give another example. So my man and my husband, he is the type of person that, he's a Scorpio. He can get a little emotional sometimes. I'm a Leo. I like to head front everything right here, right now. Griffin. um, he needs space. So he doesn't say something that'll hurt my feelings. I've pushed him before. Hey, I want to talk right now. And then when we talk, like, it'd be a screaming match, right? Because he has a fire moon. For those of you that know astrology, a fire sign moon. So when people say they need their space, that was me not respecting his boundaries, right? So if someone needs their space emotionally to cool down, relax, not react, That's something that you deserve as a human being, right? Like, I need a moment, especially with friends and family, um, and people that we associate with. Like, hey, I'm feeling a little heated. There have even been times, like in certain jobs, that I told my boss, like, I can't talk right now. What you said hurt my feelings. I mean, it was also I've had quite a few very mean, abusive bosses. So, especially if you're working at a very small company where you're kind of allowed to do that. But it's like, when you can, I mean, obviously, we as people, we have to learn to calm ourselves and not react. But it's like, emotionally, knowing when you need space in the right circumstances, knowing when you can do that, right? And then there's physical. Say you don't like being touched. I'm someone who, I don't really like hugs, unless it's my kids or my partner. And I have learned to tell people, like, listen, I love you, I respect you, but unless you're my cat or my kid, I don't really like, let's high five, right? And in my culture, because we're Russian Ukrainian, that's not really allowed. So, I used to be called very disrespectful because I had these needs. Or even with my partner, like, he knows when I'm very angry, don't touch me. Don't touch me. You know that, right? You're allowed to set these boundaries. It's your body, it's your physical being. Another one would be intellectual. So, big one. The purpose of having a conversation is to share views and ideas and your perspective without changing someone else's opinion and hearing them out. Or you can set a boundary. I'm not engaging. I'm not engaging in this conversation. I don't like politics personally. I will not talk about politics. Or, I hear your view. We're not going to get into a screaming match because that's intellectually infringing on my rights to have my opinion. Another big one is time boundaries. So, this could go a couple different ways, but time boundaries can be inviting someone last minute. It can be, I can't do this at this time because I have yoga. I'm sorry, I can't go to coffee with the girls. I have yoga. I'm sorry, I can't go to this, birthday party that you're inviting me to 2 minutes in advance, unless they give you ample time, right? Or, I have this commitment. It's honoring your commitments. I mean, obviously there's a difference between, like, someone giving you, like, you have therapy every Thursday at 4 p.m. and someone gives you like 3 months in advance. If you want to bend on that, that's up to you, right? But again, no one can force you. And then we have, like, material asset boundaries. Saying no to borrowing money. I say no to splitting the bill. This is actually a TikTok that I'm going to make eventually. But when I was pregnant with my daughter, my parents invited us for Father's Day lunch or dinner at a Russian restaurant. And it was my baby daddy, I was pregnant, and then I think he was like 9 months old at the time, my 9-month-old, 10-month-old son. So if y'all know, you know, babies, toddlers, they get into shit, okay? And I was pregnant. I was exhausted. I was 7 months pregnant. I didn't eat much. My ex didn't eat much. We were chasing that baby. No one helped us with the baby. At the end of the meal, bill comes back. It's $1,000. Of course it's $1,000 because my mom and my uncle and whatever ordered all this food for like 10 people. There was so much food left, and we barely touched anything. And to be honest with you, I think that my cousin's husband or ex-husband, I'm not sure because I don't talk to that family, he ate most of the food and then they took it home. We barely touched it. So then my mom turned around and said, here's your bill. It's $250 plus leave a good tip of $300. And I'm looking at her and I'm like, Mom, first of all, we just bought my stepdad a Father's Day gift and we spent $150. Second of all, you invited I went on my own boundaries back then because this was like at least 3 years ago because my daughter wasn't born yet. And I said, listen, we already spent all this money on the Father's Day gift. You told us originally that we would be going to your house for Father's Day. So I wasn't expecting to drop $300 on a family lunch when my baby daddy and I would go out. We wouldn't even spend $60. I mean, especially back then, we wouldn't even spend $60. The economy was a tad better, right? 2 for 20 Applebee's, 2 for 20 sushi at the time when they had it, we would spend $40. Like we wouldn't spend that kind of money. Um, and I tried to calmly explain to her, like, listen, we didn't eat like that. We barely sat down at the table. We're, running after our toddler because no one helped us. And to be honest with you, we are about to have another child in daycare. We have more expenses than anyone else at this table. And my mom turned around and she went, "You're embarrassing me. You better pay this bill. Give me your credit card. We're not paying for you. How dare you do this?" Right? And I tried to say no. I try to say, I'm not splitting this bill, or, we'll pay for what we ate. Well, you didn't eat anything. You know what I mean? And that's why going forward, I don't talk to my mom, but since then, I do not split the bill. I pay for what I got. I always pay for what I got because I am, and it's not about money. It's not about being selfish. But there are people like, you get all these drinks, you get all these things. Like, I'm not doing all that. I'm a foodie. Okay. I'm gonna order my food and I'm good. I don't care about alcohol. I mean, I will once in a while, but that's beside the point. To charge a pregnant woman and her man when we just bought a house, right? Like, we didn't have it like that. So I did end up paying it, but that was one of the last times that I talked to my family because she embarrassed me. She said, "What, you're broke? What, you don't have the money? What, you can't afford it? Of course you can afford it. You both work good jobs, blah, blah, blah." Right, but it is not your responsibility or your place to tell me how, when, why, who, what I'm going to spend my money, right? And at the end of the day, you're my mom. You know that I'm having a baby. Like, if it were my children, and I'm telling you this right now, God is my witness. When my children are adults, I'm not going to make them pay. I don't care who they're with. I invited you out. This is a Father's Day, Mother's Day, whatever event. And I know every family is different, and I'm digressing. Okay. The point is that if you're placed in a situation, maybe you have to, but going forward, if you're going to, like, right. So what would I do differently this time? If I were to go out like that with my family, I would let them know, hey, me and my husband, we're going to order separate. You have your bill, we have our bill. This doesn't work for us, right? Instead of me throwing a hissy fit. Again, this was a couple years ago, but let's keep moving. So, sexual boundaries, consent, trying new things, kinks, limits, safe words. Okay. I think I saw something on TikTok that was like, "Oh, well, I'm a dom, and when my my sub is misbehaving, we take away safe words." No, that's not a good dom. What are you doing with your life? That's actually like infringing on someone's boundaries, because at the end of the day, I can change men or women, but I deserve to be able to consent, right? So, no means no. It Okay, this is coming up now too. So this is very interesting doing this as a channeler. But say you said no, and I know so many women and girls who said no time after time, repeatedly in the bedroom with multiple men throughout their life, and they still did it. So is that grape? I say yes. A forced yes is not a yes, especially if I said yes 100 times and there's no way for me to get out of this. Let's talk about boundaries in terms of social media and digitally, right? Replying when you're comfortable. Um, I don't have to answer your phone call. I don't have to answer your texts. I don't have to be always available. I think the one thing about social media now is that, like, everyone wants you available at every point of the day. And that's not your responsibility. So how do you stay assertive, right? You stay calm, and you don't apologize. If I could go back in time, I wouldn't have paid that $300 bill. I would have said, I'm willing to give $100 and I will go to the ATM and I'll give you $100, right? That's way more than I was expecting to spend. Over $250 for Father's Day is, instead of me spending $500 for Father's Day. But you don't have to apologize. No is a complete sentence. You don't need an explanation. And other people's emotions are not your responsibility. And you have to be assertive, as hard as it is. And I'm telling this as someone who it's always been hard for me to be assertive. It's always been something that I've really struggled with because I've always depended on other people like loving me, but I realized that opinions are like assholes and everyone has one. And not only that, but opinions are constantly changing. We're people, we change our minds constantly. So the reason why we have to build self-respect is so that we can learn to love and be happy, right? A lot of us need to spend more time committing to ourselves, committing to what's important to us, and sticking to our non-negotiables, especially when it comes to self-boundaries. And that involves knowing ourselves, embracing our limits. So one of my limits, right? Something I don't talk about a lot is I have some chronic illnesses. And sometimes especially when I work a lot, which I have been recently, I don't always have the energy to do the dishes. I don't always have energy. I have 2 kids. They're 3 and 4. Our house isn't always the cleanest. And when I first started dating my man, I had to explain to him, listen, I know the dishes aren't done. I do not have the energy. I don't. And I can't burn myself out because the work that I do as a psychic, and now trying to start this YouTube and, all the clients I have, and I'm a shaman and all these things, I don't have it within me to always be on top of everything. And when the economy was better, I used to have a cleaning service. I did. But then, food shopping went up 20% and rent went up and all these things, right? But I explained to him, you can either help me rehire a cleaning service or, most days you might have to do the dishes. And as a woman, of course, that makes me feel bad. And of course, that makes me feel guilty. And of course, that makes me feel bad, like for the relationship. And it's caused some fights in the beginning. But I had to honor myself. And I had to say, it's between me folding a basket of laundry, doing the dishes, cleaning up after the kids. I mainly take care of them because he's always working. But if it's between me being the mother I need to be and helping to pay the bills or doing the dishes, you know what I mean? And he doesn't take care of the kids as much as I do because he's always at work, but that's beside the point. It's being honest with yourself. It's understanding that, like, okay, yeah, in an ideal world, when I'm having a good day, I'll do the dishes, I'll do all that, right? But then the part that I'm not always honest with myself about is when I overgive like that. Like, I think 3 or 4 weeks ago, I had a really good day and I made the bed and I did the dishes and I folded 3 baskets of laundry and I vacuumed and I cleaned my makeup mirror and I did half of my to-do list. And then 3 days later, I had the worst cold. Couldn't hear anything from both ears, couldn't breathe, okay? Because I stressed myself out, right? So it's understanding that you cannot compare yourself to other people. What your limits are and someone else's limits are going to be very different. My man doesn't have chronic illness. My man's a 27-year-old who has all this extra energy. So you can do the dishes. You know what I mean? But also comparison can be like, oh, this person makes more money than me. This person's more wealthier than me, blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, you have to respect your boundaries first to show other people to respect your boundaries as well. So, for me, that's been okay, I do the dishes when I can. It might not be the cleanest thing. I'm sure some people will be like, oh my God, I have OCD. I can never do that, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes I run the dishwasher 5 times because, I myself don't use that many utensils. So, and I'm the only one that's home all day, but it's different for everyone, right? And then at the end of the day, if people can't respect your boundaries, then they don't get to stay in your life. And you have to understand that the only person that you'll always have is yourself. The only person that you'll always have to depend on is you. So if you are doing things that are detrimental to your health and your well-being for someone else, whether financially paying for, a food bill that's way outside your budget, or staying late at work because you can't do that, or cleaning up, even if it's like something that you have to do, at the end of the day, if you know you're going to get sick, if you know you're going to be down and out, if you know you're going to be burnt out, what good is that? I would rather have to turn on the dishwasher a couple of times, or have to set a few more boundaries and not get promoted and apply elsewhere, right? There are different ways of doing things, but you can't do them unless you put yourself first. Thank you so much for watching. I love you. Just keep shining. You've got this, baby.